Lezanne Janse van Vuuren is an associate at the Center for Financial Regulation and Inclusion, Cenfri, and is leading the Cenfri implementation team responsible for RAI program in Uganda and South Africa. Her work is focused on advancing inclusive financial integrity and enabling digital transformation. She works on projects and programs that aim to combat money laundering, financing on terrorism and proliferation financing, while mitigating the impact of unintended consequences, such as financial exclusion and de-risking. Key highlights from her recent work includes support remittance services provider in Africa to enhance their KYC, CDD, and risk frameworks to enhance remittance access for low-income, rural households, and women. Working with policymakers and regulators to develop fintech policy and strategy, and conducting a pilot to introduce Africa's first legal entity identifier agent and issuing the first legal entity identifier to a MSME. She holds a Master in Society and Development at the SOAS University of London. Welcome, Lezanne. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for that kind introduction. Good day, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are very excited to share this with you. I just want to double check, David, will you be sharing the presentation from your end? There we go. I think it's starting to share on my end. Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, excellent. So as David mentioned, I will be taking you through our Remittance Access Initiative, specifically giving you an overview of the program as a whole, as well as taking you through how we implemented it in Uganda. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So starting off with a little bit of background, through its financing facility for remittances, IFAD conducted several remittance diagnostic studies in 7 African countries, including Uganda. And essentially what they found was that the way in which remittance service providers were implementing their Know Your Customer or their customer due diligence programs and practices was unintentionally acting as a barrier to remittances, specifically for low-income rural households and women. So in order to address this objective, we developed this program, which is really focused on enhancing remittance access opportunities for this target group by working with remittance service providers to essentially enhance their KYC and CDD frameworks by making them a lot more inclusive. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So in terms of how we implemented this in Uganda specifically, is we had a 3-step approach. In our first step, we really focused on getting quite a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory framework in Uganda. This was essential for us to understand the parameters as well as where there are areas for innovation. From there, we moved towards selecting 2 remittance service providers to work with under this program. Now, the way in which we did that is we started off by creating quite a large database of all the remittance service providers in Uganda, and then we applied a strict selection criteria to identify 2 remittance service providers that are well suited to this initiative. So a couple of the criteria we looked at here, for example, was we looked at whether or not the remittance service provider had a license to receive remittances in Uganda. We looked at whether or not they experienced KYC and CDD challenges that were acting as a barrier to customers accessing their remittances. And we also looked at whether or not this remittance service provider was willing and eager to innovate around these challenges. From there, we moved on to step 3. And step 3 is where we really started working with our 2 remittance service providers. So in phase 1, we focused very much on trying to understand their business practices and processes, getting a very clear idea of what their KYC and CDD frameworks were, so that we can start pulling out these challenges that they were experiencing. In phase 2, we then selected 2 or 3 challenges that we wanted to address. We developed innovative solutions to address these challenges. So with developing these solutions, we worked on providing implementation support, providing capacity building and training, and also providing communication support so that any changes that's made within the organization is well communicated with internal staff, as well as with your potential and existing customer base. Phase 3, which is where we're at with most remittance service providers now, is really focused on impact measurement and troubleshooting. So if anything perhaps needs to change around the intervention itself, then we do it in this phase to make sure that it's sustainable moving forward post the program. And also we really want to make sure that what we've done now actually enhances remittance access. So how many more people are now able to access their remittances either easier or completely. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Great. So what I've done on this slide is I've given you some examples that we picked up that remittance service providers in the Ugandan market were struggling with. So these aren't specific to the 2 remittance service providers we're working with. This is from much broader market research. Then on the right-hand side, you'll see that we've given some examples of solutions that we've brainstormed. So starting with the first one, essentially we noted that quite a few remittance service providers were struggling with effectively assessing and addressing risk. And what this means is that a lot of low-income, low-risk customers are rated as high risk and asked to jump through a lot more KYC and CDD barriers, or hurdles rather, to get to their remittances. So in order to address this, one thing we brainstormed around was actually enhancing the risk model itself so that one can better identify risk and better develop controls to mitigate those risks. And ultimately, this really allows the remittance service provider to re-risk rate their entire customer base. Another challenge we noted was that customers were forgetting their IDs and they were unable to essentially access their remittances from this. So we know in Uganda, you've got the national ID, which is the most robust and most popular identifier, and therefore remittance service providers really prefer to use this. In some cases, remittance service providers prefer to use this as opposed to any other identifier. So if a customer comes in and don't have their national ID on them, they won't be able to be served. A potential solution that we brainstormed around here was actually saving a digital copy of this customer's ID onto a digital database. This essentially allows any recurring customer to come in with an alternative photo-bearing identifier, and then your frontline teller can essentially compare the information on the alternative identifier to what you have on your database, thereby making the customer serving process a lot more robust. Another challenge here is around effectively tracking over-the-counter customers. So we know over-the-counter customers in a lot of cases are once-off customers, and it can be quite difficult to retain these customers. So in order to address this, sorry about that, in order to address this, we brainstormed around creating customer profiles for over-the-counter customers. Essentially what this entails is saving their basic KYC information on your internal database, as well as a copy of their ID. So this essentially allows these once-off customers to come in. You have reduced KYC that you need to perform over the counter, thus saving them a lot of time. And a customer profile really creates loyalty from this customer and a sense of belonging. So really able to better retain those customers as well as better serve them. The last one that I'm really going to touch on quite briefly is around challenges that illiterate customers are facing when trying to receive their remittances. So a lot of the time, illiterate customers come in and they bring family or friends with them to help them complete any processes along the way, such as filling in a money transfer form. So in this case, these customers really struggle to receive their remittances independently, which often disincentivizes them from coming in at all. So in order to address this, we brainstormed around digitizing the process as a whole and really replacing it with something like system-generated receipts. So I've given you quite a broad overview of the program itself, as well as the type of challenges that we aim to solve within this program. Now, we've been very fortunate to work with EcoBank, so I'm going to hand over to Jacob Abuje, who's the Group Manager for Remittances at EcoBank, who's going to take us through a bit around their remittances. Thank you very much, everyone. Jacob, over to you.